Hey everyone, I'm going to go over several things that are worth knowing, or at least worth learning for speedrunning Mega Man Legends. Now this isn't going to be a video that covers the whole game, not a whole route guide or anything, this is just a general tips video. So let's go and get started. So the first thing we're going to be going over is diagonal running. If you've watched any runs of this game, you'll see people just, running like this. It's because of a programming oversight. Running with both directions at once makes you run faster than just going straight this way or straight this way. Now, the thing about diagonal running is you're cornering and knowing where you're going to go next. So, for example, myself and most other people included, when they're starting to learn the game and they're diagonal running, they'll take turns really wide like this. And it works and it gets the job done, but it's not quite efficient. You want to cut the corners super sharp, like this. Cut the corner, up here, cut the corner, cut those corners super sharp. And the next thing to go over with diagonal running is knowing where your destination is, where your next turn is. So let's say I start from back here instead. I know that my next turn, when I go this way, is going to be to the right. And then after that, it's going to be another right. So, knowing where you have to go next is important, because that'll tell you what direction to face your camera. So, when I take this turn here, not only am I going to be cutting the corner sharp, I'm also going to be turning the camera to the side, because I know that my next one or two turns are going to be to the right. So, like here, cut the corner and turn right, and then go up left. So, with practice, you'll get this cornering down, but it especially helps when you memorize the area well enough so you know where your next one or two turns are going to be, so you know what direction to face. Because you don't want to be cutting this corner and your next turn is to the right and having to turn all the way around. So, knowing where you have to go next and cutting those corners really sharp will help you improve your movement quite a bit. But either way, you do want a diagonal run. And I will show another clip right after this showing just how much faster diagonal running actually is compared to straight running. Now, a couple more things I'm going to talk about when it comes to diagonal movement is skating and jumping, but we'll do skating first. So with skating, it is also faster to go diagonally, like this. Now the speed boost from diagonal skating isn't nearly as significant as diagonal running, but it's still definitely faster nonetheless, so I'll demonstrate it with a timer again, but again, it's not as much of a speed boost, but it's still something. So I did mention jumping, and the reason for that is because your airspeed is faster than your ground speed. Although it's really only applicable to high jumps, like a jump off of a high ledge, or with your jump springs. So if you try to jump to go faster without your springs, you're pretty much going even with diagonal running, and there's no reason to really, stress yourself with trying to mix in diagonal movement and jumps. So only bother with this when you're going off of a ledge that gives you more air time than a regular jump, or when you have the jump springs. So I'm gonna go into this room here, this long hallway, and I'll demonstrate diagonal running versus diagonal jumping. Now, even though diagonal jumping was indeed faster, it's still not worth trying to jump every possible time that you can, because again, it's much better to really just focus on your angle, your movement angles, your beelines, whatever you want to call it. You want to focus on getting the right angle of movement first and foremost before you try squeezing in a jump wherever possible. So jumps like those, it's especially worth it to do in a dungeon like this, where there's a lot of long straight hallways and such, but most other places it's not worth trying to jump all over the place. So just be aware of that at least. Next I want to go over stutter shooting, or what is sometimes called elsewhere as stutter stepping, rapid shooting. There's probably a number of names for it, but here in the speedrun community we call it stutter shooting. So it's almost self-explanatory. Pretty much what you're doing is, instead of holding square, you are going to mash forward. Although there's an even faster way to shoot than that, but I'll just demonstrate the difference. So here with this guy, you just regular 3 shots on him, and this next one I'm going to use just forward, and it should kill him even faster. Now to shoot even faster than that, you need to use your camera buttons. So if you're on the regular control scheme where you use R1 and L1 to turn, then what you do is you hold them both together, and you can shoot even faster and a little bit more consistently. Now don't mash too fast, you want to do it at a set rhythm. So I'll demonstrate on this guy. So those are your ways of shooting. You got your regular shooting, then you got pressing up to shoot even faster, and even faster than that is your camera buttons. Now if you're on the alternate control scheme with the tank controls, I think it's this one. Yeah, use L1 and R1 to strafe and left and right to turn. You do it by mashing diagonal. I'm not used to this control scheme, so you have to forgive me, but it's kind of like this. So that's kind of how you do it on that control scheme. So again, you have to forgive me that I don't play on this control scheme, but if you do, mash diagonal. And if you play on the other scheme, hold both together. So the next few tips I'm going to go over are really basic mechanics that I don't remember if the game really teaches you these or not, but they're things that I see casual players either not know they exist, forget they exist, or they just don't use them for some reason. But either way, it's something good for casual players and new runners learning alike. So the first one I want to talk about is quick turning. And all you do, instead of, manually turning all the way around with your camera buttons, you press a direction and circle. So if I want to quick turn to the right, press right and circle. Make sure to prioritize the direction first before pressing circle, but either way, you press them more or less at the same time. Just prioritize the direction first. So you can do sideways, 90 degrees, we're going to do a 180 backwards. So instead of turning all the way around, it's a quick turn. And I chose this dungeon to demonstrate that because almost every chest you get, you want a quick turn afterward. So I'll go in here and demonstrate. Alright, the next thing to go over is dodge rolling. I don't remember if the game teaches you about this or not, but all you do is press a camera turn button and X. You can kind of hold the camera turn button first, but either way. R1 and X, or L1 and X, and you'll dodge that way. If you're on the other scheme, you do right and X, or left and X. And the startup frames for the roll are invincible, but towards the end of the roll, the invincibility frames wear off. So that's why it's important to actually keep in mind that when you want to roll to dodge something, it's better to do it later than earlier, because the startup frames are invincible, like I said. So I picked this boss, you know which boss this is, and at the start of the fight, he charges up 2 green orbs and fires them at you, and it's one of the few bosses in the entire game that almost requires you to know how to dodge roll like this, to avoid getting hit at the beginning. So I'll demonstrate trying to just roll as late as possible, and you'll see what I mean. Alright, next is manual aiming and lock-on. Now, lock-on is totally optional, but there are some very small use cases where it's good to have lock-on. Now, if you don't want to bother with lock-on, all you have to do is just go to your options and turn it off that way, so that way you can use R2 to aim manually. However, if you want to keep it enabled and still be able to manually aim and not worry about lock-on gluing to a target, what you do is you hold L2 and R2 together. So normally, I'll demonstrate here. Holding R2, I'm locking on. Now if I hold L2, suddenly I can aim. So, doesn't matter if there's a target around me. If I hold both together, I'm not going to lock onto him. Now this is mainly useful for places like City Hall, when you got to kill the flyers before you can take out the ground bots, because the flyers will go pick up more ground bots. And, you know, you want to be able to aim ahead of where they're going, instead of, you know, relying on lock-on and having shots either whiff most of the time or sometimes land and lock-on switching targets all willy-nilly. So I'll demonstrate the City Hall section, but either way, if you want to have lock-on enabled and still be able to manual aim, hold both together. Alright, here's the City Hall section. I'm going to first lure the flying guys over towards the right side of the map where the police station is. And then I'm going to show how unreliable lock-on can be, where not all the shots will land and it'll start switching targets based on who's close to me. And then after that, I'll start holding both together to manual aim and shooting ahead of where they're going to be, you know, leading your shot. And most of the shots should start landing at that point, as long as, you know, you practice and get better at aiming. It's kind of changing targets on me. Not all the shots are landing. Some of them are kind of whiffing for no reason. Again, the target switching doesn't make much sense. Now if you manual aim and just aim ahead of where they're going to be, start landing your shots. Takes some practice, but once you get it down, it's way better than relying on lock-on. So next is the jet skates. Now the game definitely tells you how to use them. You hold circle while standing and you start skating. Now what I don't remember if it tells you or not is whether or not you use forward and back, because if you hold forward while skating, you start moving faster. If you hold back, you start skating slower, but you get to turn corners much tighter. So here's an example. I'm gonna hold forward, and I'm going faster. And speaking of going faster, diagonal movement does apply here too, like I showed earlier in the video. But don't just hold left or right and make it look like you're moving diagonally, because it doesn't work that way. You have to actually hold both directions to get the full movement bonus. So, hold both directions, don't just hold left or right. Doesn't work that way. Use both. Now for using the brakes, we're going to use this area over here as an example, and then I'll also show the spiral area in the main gate. Now, you want to use the brakes to turn corners much sharper, so I'll go through this area a few times, once going full speed, and then you can turn corners a little bit better without holding forward, just using left or right, and then I'll show using the brakes. So we're going through here full speed, I'm trying to make this turn. I'm rubbing against that wall, that's really bad, that's really slow. Now, I'm going to do the turns without holding forward, and it'll help a little bit. So it does help to not use forward, but if you use the brakes, you can turn those corners much tighter. So that's the basic movement with the jet skates. Some of it you may not have known, but definitely keep in mind when to hold forward and when to use the brakes. And always move diagonally. And then I'm going to show the main gate, that really long spiral area. That's one of the areas where you really want to get used to using forward and back. If you're not using the brakes very much in that spiral, you'll just rub up against the walls all the way down, and doing that is very slow. So I'll go through it a little bit, not using the brakes. See how I'm kind of just rubbing against the wall for quite a bit. Now if I use the brakes, it's much smoother. So this is one important area where you do want to get down using forward and back. So next is weapons, and specifically how you want to use the triangle button. So right now I have these splash mines equipped, and usually for a weapon like this and some other ones, or I guess most of them rather, you want to hold triangle instead of mashing it. So I'm going to use data as an example here, and I'm going to mash triangle, and by doing that my rate of throwing out splash mines is going to be really inconsistent, which means my DPS is not going to be as high as it can be. So you can see my inputs, and then you can listen for the explosions, and it's going to be not a consistent rate. Now if I hold triangle, it will come out as fast as possible and have the highest DPS, consistent fire rate, everything. Now, I use this room as an example because 2 boss fights take place in here, and both of them really rely on holding triangle for your mines. Specifically the second one, Feldinot, Tron's big red robot. You really cannot get the stun lock on her leg unless you're holding triangle. If you're trying to mash foot, you're not going to get it. So next is menu swapping. What I mean by that is going from submenu to submenu without having to back all the way out to the main pause menu that I'm at right here. So for example, this is normal items, and instead of, backing out to go to special items, you can just press R1 to go from normal items to special items, and you can keep cycling through other menus too. So from special items, you go to Buster, Weapons, and Options, and it works going the other way too. You use L1 to go from Options to Weapons, Buster Parts, Special Items, Normal Items. And I choose this section because this is one of the more menu heavy parts of the run, where as soon as you get here, In a run, you want to put on new buster parts, and then equip the jump springs, and then call roll with the walkie-talkie. So what normal people would do, they would put on the parts, back out, then go to special items, and you know, that wastes a lot of time. So in a run, you would just put on the parts that you want, L1 to special items, put on the springs, then call roll, and then you get teleported across the area. So it's important to learn to use L1 and R1 for your sub-menus. So this next thing here is a safety strategy sort of tip. It involves the canteen. And a lot of the time, when I see people learning the speedrun, or just casual players even, they'll use the canteen even though their health is low but not empty. Now in Mega Man Legends, doesn't matter how much health you have left, if it's low or whatever, if you get hit by something really hard, something really strong, if your health is low, you will survive no matter what. You'll always have that empty health bar with 1 hit remaining before you actually die. So I bring that up because even though I have 5 points of health, you see there on the left, even if I have, like, say, 1 point of health, and Juno's second form hits me with his ram attack, that attack will do 5+ points of damage. And even if I have 1, I'll still survive with that empty health bar. So the point I'm trying to get across here is that you should save your canteen until your health bar actually is empty. Don't wait until it's low and then use it. If you wait until your health bar actually is empty, you'll be able to survive another 1-2 more hits, you know, depending on what boss you're fighting. So I'm here in front of Juno's door. He's the example I named. I'm going to get to the second phase of the fight with less than full health, and when I let him hit me with his ram attack, I'll survive, and then I'm going to use the canteen, let him hit me again, and I'll still be alive. So that's one way you can really keep yourself alive, as long as you just know how to manage your canteen. So the last thing I'm going to go over is the Japanese version and why most of us run on it. So there's 2 reasons why we prefer it. 1, because it's faster, as you probably would have guessed, and 2, because there's control changes that make it pretty much a lot better to run on. So the reason why it's faster, there's a couple reasons, but the biggest one is the number of text boxes in the game is significantly reduced. So this version saves around 2 to 3 minutes, might be more or less, I'm honestly not sure, but let's say, for example, in the English version you have a given section that has around 10 text boxes to it. Well, in the Japanese version, that number of text boxes might be cut down to somewhere around 5 to 8. And I'll give an example here with the intro dungeon. Right before you fight the boss, there's a difference in the number of text boxes that appears, and you can pretty much just count them and you'll see what I mean. Alright, so here I am on the Japanese version in front of the boss door. I want to count how many text boxes there are, then get back here on the English version and count them again, and that'll pretty much prove the point why Japanese is faster. So let's count them. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 text boxes. Now I'm going to go to the English version and we'll count how many there are there, and there's going to be more, I guarantee it. Okay, here we are again on English. So again, we're going to count the text boxes, and it's going to be more than the Japanese version. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. See how many more that is? That's now just imagine that throughout the entire game, and you can see why it starts to save a huge amount of time. So here's another reason why the Japanese version is faster. So here on the English version, when you want to save Tron, you have to talk to her first, and then you have to talk to the dog. And you have to wait out a portion of it before you can finally skip it. On the Japanese version, you can just kick the dog and it's already over, and you skip a cutscene. Whereas here, you can only finally skip it right around here on English. So, Japanese version, kick the dog, it's over with. You're on English, you're losing like 10-15 seconds, maybe more. So, another reason why Japanese is faster. Alright, so here's the last major reason why it's better to run on Japanese, and it's because of the controls. Now, here I am in this room on English version, and if you know this room well, there's like 3 text boxes you have to skip, and in English, you hold triangle to skip text boxes. And you can already see why that's bad. You're wasting your special weapon energy, and if you have a weapon unequipped, you're wasting time kicking. And clearly, here's the reason why it can get obnoxious. Wasting weapon energy, potentially running into your own splash mine, wasting time kicking, whatever. Now, if for whatever reason you can't run the Japanese version, like you don't have access to it, don't want to bother yet, whatever, there's a minor workaround for you. Hold square and triangle at the same time, and it'll prioritize your buster. That way, you can still at least turn and move while shooting, and you don't waste your weapon energy, and you don't stand there kicking, so that's one reason why the Japanese controls are better. I'll show why specifically, but English controls, blah. Here's another reason why. If you're like spamming triangle to get out of your menus, again, you're making the same mistake, wasting your special weapon energy. So I'll demonstrate another area on the Japanese version for why it's better to just use the Japanese controls. Alright, so I decided to just use the same room to make things more fair. So, you're on Japanese version. The major differences with the controls are your X and circle button. So in English, you know, triangle to skip cutscenes and also use your special weapon. On Japanese, it's X, your jump button. And as you can see, when I have X still held, I'm not jumping multiple times. So I'll demonstrate what uses this has. So in a run, you're going to be jumping through a text box, and in English version you would have to, you know, jump through it, let go, and hold triangle. Whereas on Japanese, you can just jump through it and keep X held and not have to worry. Same with this text box up here. Jump, keep it held. And then you can still keep it held right now and work with the third text box by just, you know, pressing circle with it still held. See? No stress, no worrying about when you have to let go of triangle to avoid kicking and wasting special weapon stuff. You know, just, it's pretty good. And then the other use that I kind of hinted at is not jumping when you've already used up your jump, or when there's, you know, no way to jump right when you press it. So there's a hole in the wall in the next room. Now if I want to avoid jumping right when I want to interact with it, I can just hold jump right now. I'm holding X. And as you can see, I didn't jump as soon as I gained control. I go over here, instantly skipping text boxes, no accidental jumps. So there's many areas throughout the game on this version where you want to hold X way ahead of time to avoid an extra jump, and to also skip text boxes without really worrying about it. Now the other change is that your confirm button is circle. So it might be kind of a strange change, but you know, it's standard in Japan most of the time. But you know, if your cancel button, your skip text button is X, what else would your confirm button be? So it's a little weird to get used to at first, but once you get it down, you'll not want to go back. But it's mainly because of the issues with triangle and X. Circle is just a thing that has to be because of that change. But yeah, that's the main reason why the Japanese controls are a lot better.